All right. Welcome, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for our fourth session in our Pride series. My name is Candace Lopez, and I'm with Project Peace, which is Arlington, Virginia's coordinated community response to domestic and sexual violence. Today, we are wrapping up our series with a specific case study session where we're going to be looking at different scenarios and take any questions from you or scenarios that you all have seen and have questions about. To make sure that we are really thinking about how we can support and be allies to the LGBTQIA plus community in the work that we do. I have with me today two of the presenters who have been doing the series for us over the month. One of them is on your screen, Dr. Julie Alexandrin. She is an administrator and associate professor at the University of Phoenix in the College of General Studies. She earned her PhD in educational, I'm sorry, my Word document's cutting off here, in educational psychology with a program centered on the intersectionality of special education, gifted and talented education, and diversity education. She currently co-facilitates YALS, a youth group emphasizing leadership and advocacy with a focus on the sexual and gender minority communities, which is connected to Safe Space Nova. Additionally, we should have Ari Rivera joining us. She is the senior court advocate at Doorways. Doorways is the sole domestic and sexual violence provider here in Arlington, Virginia. She's having some technical difficulties, so you may see her pop up here. So apologies that she's not here to start with us, but she should be joining us. And then again, I'm Candace with Project Peace. With that, I want to turn it over to Dr. Alexandrin, and we'll be using the chat and video and voice for any questions you all may have. Julie?
So I think you can go to the next slide. It's good that everybody's here and welcome. So we just want to do kind of our safe space norms that respect, and also feel free to take risks are sometimes really important when we're learning about new things, to ask questions that you may not totally feel comfortable asking. This is a place, when I do a lot of diversity trainings, I talk about how this is a place where you can ask politically incorrect questions, because sometimes those are the most important that we need answers to, but have no other space to get them. And then open oopses and ouches that will be open to what people say and what their experience is. And then also realize that sometimes we oops by saying things that are not totally appropriate, and for others to say, hey, that hurt, that was hard. Safety, we want to make sure that everybody feels safe. And so hoping that you're feeling safe and in the environment. So if you're not, please let us know, or please feel free to step away. And then to really listen to what other people say. A lot of times when we're listening, we are not, we're thinking about what we're going to say next instead of really fully listening to what we're hearing. I see that Ari's on, but is your audio on yet, Ari? No, it's still connecting. So Candace, you want to go to the next slide? We'll just keep going and hopefully Ari's audio will come up. So we didn't have any submitted questions, but at this point, we'd be happy to take questions. If anybody knows of anything that they want to ask, you can put it in the chat. I think the next slide, Candace, has how you can do questions. You can either raise your hand and do it on video or with your mic. You can post it in the chat just to everyone, or you can post it in the chat to Ari or myself or to Candace as the three hosts. And there's Ari's now. Hi, Ari. Oh, I think you're still on mute.
Thank you so much for your patience. Is that better?
Yes, good that you're here. Okay. So, yes. So if anybody has any questions that they want to unmute themselves and let us know, or put it in the chat. If not, we've kind of have a couple case studies that we can start with and see if that leads us to anywhere with any discussion. But feel free to, the questions can come from any of the previous presentations, hence why Ari and I are both here, since we both have done different presentations. So we have questions from Ari's last week about working with domestic violence and LGBTQIA+, or from the vocabulary one that I did, or the hidden and social bias one that I've also done. So anything else you want to say here at the beginning, Ari, or should we just jump into the case studies? Oh, you're muted again.
I am sorry. I'm just gonna, okay. I don't really have much to say other than just, remembering that everyone's in a different learning phase, and so this is the time to ask questions. Don't feel like, you know, you don't want, how can I say it? Let me just say this is a time to ask questions. You don't want to have those conversations with the clients when they're sitting in front of you. So just, you know, it's a safe space. Let's respect everyone's learning opportunity, and let's also be respectful.
Right. And knowing that people are at very different places in their experiences. And I've heard very different things too. Like if you've heard a myth and you're like, I wonder, is that really true? Or heard something and you want to question that, this is also a great time for the two of us to answer those for you also, and realize you are probably not the only one thinking it, but hopefully you'll be brave enough to ask. So, well, no questions. So why don't we go ahead and go on to the first case study. Candace, can you do the next slide? So here's the case study. You've noticed a fellow staff member making comments that are subtly homophobic and transphobic, which are making you and others uncomfortable. You're sure if this person realizes what they are saying is problematic. You're not sure if this person realizes what they are saying is problematic or not. What might you do? So if you want to answer, feel free to raise your hand, or feel free to put what you think how you should handle it in the chat. So, yep, talk to them privately or talk to a manager. Ask the person to repeat themselves. Ask for clarification. All good responses. I think for me, this scenario really kind of goes back to what we were talking about the second week with the hidden bias and the social biases. In general, I try to err on the side of giving someone a one-on-one before either going to HR or calling them out. I agree. I definitely would suggest talking to them before talking to them to HR. But a lot of times too, sometimes we use language that the people around us are using, and we don't realize that it could be homophobic or transphobic because we've heard it so much in society. Like a big one that a lot of people use that don't always realize it is when you're like, hey guys, let's go do this. And for a lot of people, that can be considered transphobic because it's classifying everyone into one type of gender instead of the whole spectrum. Yes, and sometimes speaking in the moment is good. I think the other thing too is having like a policy where you have an oopses and an ouches policy, where if you're in a meeting, you can say, hey, that hurt, and let me tell you why, and help educate people. And if you have that type of environment where you're working, then you can have those type of dialogues right away, and they're very good. Ari, your thoughts? Oh, you're muted again.
No, I know. I was unmuting. I'm sorry. I'm at home, right, because of the working from home. So it's a little, anyway. Yeah, absolutely. I think addressing it with one of the difficulties, right, when you address something with a coworker is that you're going to be seeing that staff member continuously. So it may feel uncomfortable to bring that up. However, if you are not, let me put it this way. There's a place of privilege that folks have who aren't trans, right? And so part of the community. So at that point, that is kind of the importance of allyship, is that so that we have folks that stand up for us when we're not part of the conversation. And also part of that, it shouldn't be the responsibility of the person that holds that identity to keep being the one that holds people accountable. Sometimes it's not safe for them. Sometimes it's just, it's emotionally draining to have to do it constantly, to have to continuously justify yourself, justify your identity, your gender identity, and have really no support within staff. And again, those conversations can be uncomfortable, but sometimes when it comes from the person that holds the identity, and people can perceive it as, well, you're just being whiny. But if it comes from an ally, then, in that conversation, it shows they don't get defensive because it's coming from another person who isn't part of that community. So those are the opportunities in the places that we need the allyship.
Right. And Shannon asked for an example you could do in a work situation. So one thing that I would suggest is if you hear someone say something that is homophobic or transphobic, you can say, hey, can we stop for a second and just talk about, I love what you've said, but some of the words or some of the idioms that you use can be considered offensive to different people, and can I tell you why? And so that you're not putting down the person for generally what they're saying, that you're talking more about the words that they're saying and the language that they're saying, and also that you're helping to educate them to understand that, because like "that's so gay" is still used very, very much throughout society. And a lot of times people don't even totally realize they're saying it. So sometimes it's also bringing that awareness that they're using that language is really, really important.
And sorry.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, and so I use humor, but that's because that's my personality. But sometimes when people do say things like "that's so gay," I usually say, "Oh, I didn't know that object had a sexuality," right? And then they'll be like, "Oh, ha ha ha," and then you can be like, "Yeah, so maybe use a different kind of word." And so sometimes sometimes it works, but I think again, when people get confrontational, the other person gets defensive, and that is not an opportunity for education or teaching or any of that. So sometimes rather than be very you'll know your coworkers. There's some that you can be straightforward with, and I've done that. There's some that you have to actually be a little bit softer around so that the conversation is it's a conversation versus an argument.
Yeah.
And so is that, yeah.
And I think that's a really good point, Ari, about the walls going up and the defenses going up, right? So if you approach someone and they feel threatened, or they feel that you're, making them not look good, or those kinds of things, their defenses are going to go right up, and they're not going to listen to anything that you're saying. But to really, the more you can do it as, hey, you had these really good points, but this is a little bit something, or it might be someone that you can't do that in front of other people, and instead you pull them aside and talk. So figuring that out with different people, there will be different ways to do it. But I think really also having a meeting space where everybody feels safe also means that people can say those things when they're hurt or when something happens. And also realizing that a lot of the things that people are saying that are subtly homophobic or transphobic, they don't totally always realize that they are, because they've not been in the community, or they've not been talking to other people who are in the community, and so they don't always know, because a lot of these things like "that's so gay" is seen as part of the social norm. And so really it's educating people in that piece. Any other thoughts? Do you want to start the second case study, Ari?
Okay. So you're interacting with a new client, and they introduce themselves as Alex, and they look very androgynous. You're not really sure what pronouns to use. What should you do?
So feel free to unmute yourself and tell us, or put it in the chat. Either way.
Okay. Ask Alice. Just ask. For preferred pronouns. So I usually, and I know this is common terminology, but preferred pronouns, there's starting to be a move from, rather than saying prefer pronouns, saying, oh man, what is the word I was just looking for? Like correct pronouns, or
just
it'll
pronouns.
come to me.
Yeah, or just
right.
pronouns.
What are your,
Elizabeth
yes, thank you. What are your gender pronouns? Thank you. That's what yes, thank you. Versus preferred, because preferred creates this belief that your gender is a choice, right? That being trans is a choice. So we want to, rather than do that, we want to respect folks' actual identity. So yeah, what are your pronouns? And usually So let me see. What else? Pronouns. Yes. So Elizabeth put something that I was going to bring up. Introduce yourself using your pronouns. And so that always creates a space of safety, or at least as the individual, if there's anyone that identifies outside the binary, it'll make them feel at least a little bit more comfortable around you. So if they need that support, they may come to you. So I usually I didn't introduce myself, but I usually do introduce myself, and I'll say, my name is Ari, my pronouns are she, her, and hers. And sometimes people will respond and sometimes they won't, but it's uncomfortable to ask back, but I think it's important. And if they feel comfortable, they'll tell you. And if they don't feel comfortable, they won't really tell you. And some people do get defensive, right, when you ask their gender pronouns. But any ideas?
Oh.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. Sorry.
I just wanted to say what Candace said in the chat for anybody who can't see the chat, just to let you know that we are recording this, just so you know. So if you speak up, you will be recorded. We just wanted to do that because we forgot. Go ahead, Ari, sorry.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, so Elizabeth, yeah, if you have name tags at work, it's great to have pronouns listed on this. That's absolutely true. At Doorways, we have our pronouns listed in our signature for that reason, right? And so at meetings, we're trying to normalize that idea of introducing ourselves when we have new staff with our gender pronouns. So it's always going to be a work in progress, and it's a learning. It's learning. So it's better to make mistakes and apologize versus get defensive, because you're learning, and being defensive doesn't help anyone.
Elizabeth has another good point. That not everybody even knows when you say, what are your pronouns? Not everybody understands what you're asking. And so really helping to educate people that that's really important for some people, that people know what their gender is so that we identify their gender. One of the things that people haven't mentioned in here is, instead of using she, her, hers, or he, him, you can always, if you don't know for sure, you can always do they, their, them, because that is now officially seen as singular non-gender pronouns. So by addressing someone as them or they or theirs is another way to not have to gender a person, especially if you don't know. And in fact, APA, which is the Applied Psychology Association, in their 7th edition of their APA guidelines for how you format papers, they are now saying, do not use he or she, use they, their, or them. And that is just great to see, and really exciting that it really is being welcomed in now as a singular non-gender pronoun. Yeah, and sometimes asking someone, Elizabeth makes another good point, and sometimes asking someone, you are making them out themselves in some way of saying what their gender is. So the other thing too is, if you don't know someone's gender, is to not use pronouns. Just always refer to them in their name. Instead of doing that. And in fact, I know some people who prefer not to use pronouns at all, and will say, no, don't use pronouns for me. Please just use my name when you're referring to me. And so thinking about that too, of that kind of the social pressure that this is how we talk and describe people, doesn't always work with other people, because that's for the mainstream, mostly homophobic mainstream, whereas other people are trying to get their voices heard and come into that and come into their identity. And so so realizing that piece too is happening too, is that we're having a subculture come in and hopefully influence the main culture, so that we do talk more about pronouns, and or we do stay more general, that you don't have to identify whether you're male or female, that you can just be a person instead of having to be one gender or the other. Any other thoughts, Ari? Sorry, I kind of took over.
You're fine. No, I mean, you've pretty much covered it all. That has certainly been something I've always been mindful of, right? Because I have the privilege of being a cis woman. So it's easy for me to say my pronouns, but I have a thought about that, about how someone may feel outed. And sometimes intention is not impact, right? We may have the right intention, but we may negatively impact someone. So I agree with Julie, just using names when you are talking about someone to another person, just saying they, or just names in general, and that'll kind of pick that up. It'll at least start creating that culture, and actually it normalizes it for you as well. So it's, that way when you do meet someone who identifies as they and them, then it's already been normalized, at least a little bit. But yeah, everything's pretty much been said.
Right. And this really is a cultural shift too. So like if someone says what their gender pronouns are and then you use the wrong gender pronoun, then you apologize and you say, I'm really, really sorry. I just, and especially if it's someone who's transitioned and you've used the wrong pronouns, you apologize and say, I'm really sorry, and then go on. You don't have to do this huge, layers and layers of reasons of why it was happening. You just say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that, and you just go on. So I think that's another piece with using pronouns, and especially if someone's transitioned either from he, she, him, his, or she, her, hers, and have gone to they, them, their, or all the other ways around that it could be, that it can be a transition also for you and the people when you're dealing with pronouns. Any other thoughts about this one? Candace is having us go to the next one already. You were giving a tour to a potential volunteer, and they ask if the office is LGBTQIA friendly. How might you respond? What are people's thoughts about this one? Again, in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself. Honesty, says someone. Hopefully that your office does have something like that is nice that it could be that way. Part of what we put this question in also was for people to really start thinking about, what does your office space, what does the place that you're meeting with volunteers or even with clients, where is that? And what does it look like, and how, from people from different backgrounds, how are they going to feel? Yes, a lot of people definitely would define LGBTQIA friendly in very different ways. And in some ways, that's a great conversation to have with your agency or with the people that you're working with. What does this mean that it's LGBTQIA friendly? What does it look like? What do we have? How do people know when they walk in that it is safe to disclose that they might use they, their, them as their gender, and or that they're transgender, or they're lesbian or gay or bi? How do they know that that's safe? Yeah, Elizabeth has a good point too, that when we talk about LGBTQIA, we're talking about a huge range, right? And so we might have got that sexuality differences, the sexuality minority piece there. We've got the two female couple and the and lots of different relationships, but we may not have trans or gender non-binary, all of those kinds of things, other types of classifications, especially around gender. And I think that for a lot of times, that's what I mostly see. Like, a lot of people say, oh yeah, we're good with the LGB, but we haven't gotten to the T yet, and not quite known that. Your thoughts, Ari?
That's also very common within the community, though. So if trans folks have they've always been kind of left out of conversations. I mean, those of you that were in the training last week when I talked about domestic and sexual violence, we learned that half of trans folks experience that. And I also mentioned that the average life, the oldest, what was I trying to say? that trans folks live at least, average 35, and that's, very young. And so part of that, yeah, there can, and that's very common. I think that folks, yes, are at a place where they're accepting of sexual orientation but not gender identities. In those cases, I would say it's even more important to speak up. And sure, there may be one person that's anti-trans or anti-LGBTQ, and it makes it an unsafe space, but also it's a learning opportunity, right? If you're not part of again, this is where allies are important, are needed, because in those conversations can happen if that individual is escalating or doing some sort of harassment, then that would be an HR opportunity, again, from an ally. I just want to emphasize, when things come from allies, it holds a little bit more strength. It's important to have those, like, we can do it, definitely, so we would, but in addition to that, having other folks, kind of just assist us. And it can be uncomfortable, but just, it's important to consider how uncomfortable and how seriously unsafe it is for the actual employees that are part of the community. And that's more important than having that uncomfortable conversation with one person. And now there's a lot of organizations that have anti-harassment policies. So, I mean, that's harassment, right? Or anti-harassment, anti-racism, sort of those policies. So kind of getting to learn your policies in your organization, it's also a good idea, so that you can even say that and say, our company policy states that we are not able to have those kind of conversations within the agency. I respect your opinions, I respect your viewpoints, or not, I wouldn't respect them, but just kidding. Learning opportunity.
Right.
But no, right, we can say, I'll respect your viewpoint. I respect your viewpoints. I respect where you're at. Just let's have those conversations outside of the workspace and not inside of the workspace.
Right. And I think it's important too that, kind of the first stepping place is to say, okay, you, as someone who's anti-trans or anti-LGBT, saying to them, I understand that you are not at a place that this is accepting, but you have to treat everyone who walks into this agency or who works in this agency with respect. So if that's if that's an issue with them, with work, showing respect to anybody in the department or wherever you work, then that's an HR situation, because that is harassment. And with the ruling that just came from the Supreme Court, then they're saying that gender harassment and sexuality harassment do fall under gender harassment that is now protected by Title IX. So and that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, because that hasn't always fallen under Title IX before. So it's going to be interesting, because it is under the Civil Rights Act, but then Title IX is the act that is gender focused. So all of that kind of thing is, I think, going to fall out in the courts the next couple of years. But also really thinking about thinking about how you can create a bridge to this person so that you can have that conversation, like we were talking about the other one. You don't want them to build up their defenses, because then nothing's going to happen and you won't be able to connect with them. But if you can create some type of space and have an open space, and talking is really important. I used to teach at an all-girls college that was Catholic, so a Catholic all-girls school, very small, and I would teach a diversity course, and one of the things I would do is I would never come out that I was a lesbian until at least halfway through the class. And when I did, most of the students were like, "No, you can't be, but you're so nice," or "You have children," or so like all of their stereotypes that they were thinking, like this is what a lesbian person is, totally came to front. And it wasn't that it was more that they had never been in a space that challenged those before. And so sometimes it's making that bridge. So because we had that bridge, because we had that connection, they're much more willing to talk to me about it and talk about their experiences. And in fact, that's where we've seen people grow the most. I know somebody else who you know, whose story has that they were working in a very conservative place and transitioned. And even though it was a very conservative place and they transitioned, because they had a relationship with the people before they started transitioning, they helped them, you know, they supported them through the transition. And so because they had that relationship, so that's where you really see diversity grow the most, is when you have that relationship. So even saying, I understand that's what you believe, this is what I believe, but we're going to have respect for each other. That's the first great place to start. Other thoughts or questions?
I have one last thing to add. It's okay to also use your learning, your path of learning with them, right? It's okay to say, you know, 10 years ago, I was in the same place where, you know, I wasn't ready to accept the idea of trans folks. And, you know, and it took me some time to start accepting trans folks or recognizing trans folks. You know, and during that process, I learned, you know, A, B, and C. So it's okay to say I've made those same mistakes, because we weren't born woke, right? We weren't born with all this information. Some of us have those biases. Some of us internalize things, and so it's okay. It's okay to put yourself out there, because then they know there's no defensiveness, right? Then that brings your walls down, and it brings their walls down.
Yeah. And I think, you know, you really hit a point too, Ari, that this is a whole process. You know, it's not just going to happen overnight that everything's going to be LGBTQ friendly and it's going to be wonderful. Though that would be great if we could snap our fingers and have that happen. But it is a process. If there's change that needs to happen within an agency or change that needs to happen within people, that's a process. Yeah, good point. Do you want to do the fourth one, Ari? Oh, there you go. Thanks, Candace.
Okay. A staff member shares at a staff meeting that they are trans and would like everyone to use the new name and the pronouns they, them, their. While everyone at the staff meeting is very positive and affirming in the moment, afterwards there is a lot of confusion and hesitancy about how to proceed. People aren't sure how to let others know what to do when they mess up pronouns names, what other types of support this person may want and need. How might you proceed? All right, so if you all want to share your thoughts, yeah, in the chat, again, you can certainly speak up. This is being recorded, so if you don't want to be recorded when you speak up, then you can certainly do the chat.
So Nick is saying that it's, if you mess up with the pronouns, say you're sorry and say them. Betty Ann is saying wouldn't be honest conversation with the staff, wouldn't be appropriate, of course, with respect above all things. So are you saying it wouldn't be an honest conversation? Betty Ann, I don't quite understand. Or Ari, do you understand that one better than me?
No, I was going to ask for some clarification on that one. So it says, okay, how people aren't sure how to let others know. I support this person. Okay, so why not have an honest conversation with the person themselves? Is that the person in the staff meeting that doesn't necessarily, like the person that's confused, that kind of the conversation, or with the person who is trans?
Trans.
Okay. As far as, okay. So I think this kind of goes back to kind of the previous conversations we've been having about allyship. I'm not sure if this is if what that if I'm understanding, and I don't mean to put words in anyone's mouth, is that if the staff is the one that is confused and they're hesitant, it shows they were positive when they were in front of the person, right? According to this, it is afterwards that people are starting to really be confused and hesitant. So again, that is a space for folks to step up and answer those confusions, because these confusions are not going to be voiced to the trans individual. They're going to be voiced to colleagues that are not trans. So that is the opportunity to do that. Also, this should already be happening, especially if the organization considers themselves LGBTQI accepting. There should already be some sort of training, so that when there is an individual that is trans, the confusion has kind of been already addressed before this individual, because this comes back to not having that individual be the one that's teaching everyone else about their identities. So I do have an example of this, because it was there at Doorways. We've had an intern who was the first intern to come out as non-binary. So they came in as using pronouns she, right? And so at some point they realized that Doorways does receive a training at the beginning of LGBTQ terminology and so forth. And so once they found that out, and they started developing those relationships. So I actually, myself and my colleague are the ones that do that presentation. So they know, right? They knew that. Sorry, that's my cat. They knew that. Oh, thank you, Nick. My cat is very pretty. Thank you. His name's Hagrid. But anyway, yeah. So that individual realized, those two folks are people I can go to. So they stepped up. They came to me. They told me, this is my identity. And a way I supported this individual is I said, okay, who can I, as we learned last week, who do you want me to share that with? Who have you shared that with? And then saying, do you want me to start sharing that with other people and advocate for you that way? And in this case, they said, yes, that would be helpful. So it's not just them. So anytime anyone, we were having a conversation about them, if anyone said she, I'd be like, actually, they identify as they, right? And anytime that individual kept saying she, I would say they. And so that kind of, and again, people apologize, but they don't get defensive, because again, I'm not trans, so it's coming from me, and it's not coming from from a trans individual. So that's kind of the support they may need. And then if they mess up, they can apologize. That's, like Julie mentioned, there's no reason to include a whole narrative as to why you messed up with the pronouns. Really, just saying I'm sorry, and just moving on and using the correct one. So, okay, Elizabeth, go to the trans person and ask if they're comfortable if you put together resources training for the rest of the staff. Yep, absolutely. Yeah,
Shannon. Shannon has a good one too. I think doing a little research on your own for what for other sources they might need or might be helpful, so they don't feel like it's their responsibility to educating everyone. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Shannon. I missed that one because I think that's when my cat was acting up. But yes, absolutely.
And also, a lot of times too, we also recommend companies having a policy or a procedure for how you support a person who is transitioning, whether it's they're transitioning from one gender to another, or whether it's they're transitioning from a gender to gender non-binary. That if you have, it's really good for your company to have a protocol of how you're going to deal with that, or your policy, or your SOP, standards of operating procedures of what are you going to do in this type of situation, because not only is there the transition that the person is making and everyone around them needs to, but you need to change email, sometimes, and you need to change and change other things around. And so that's really important. And also then looking, you know, what's the policy about bathrooms when someone's who's non-gender? That should also be something that's in your procedures or in your policies. How do you deal with this, and what is it? You know, if you can have gender, you know, gender non-gendered bathrooms is really the best way to do it. Is really, but I know a lot of people work, you know, have just an office in a big complex, and so it's really hard to non-gender some of the bathrooms. But if you can talk to your landlord, what we've done, what I know other agencies have done in some buildings, is the one floor that they're on are non-gender specific bathrooms, and all the other floors in the building are gendered. So that when they have clients and people come in, they know that the bathrooms are safe for them to use. And if people don't feel safe using the non-gendered bathrooms, there are other floors that they can go to use the bathrooms. And if people say, hey, that's really inconvenient, well, that's the life for most transgender and gender non-conforming people. It's really nice for them to have a place that's finally kind of them in the forefront and kind of instead of them always in the background.
And something very important to that I think most folks don't know is there are a lot of trans folks that don't use public bathrooms. And so that affects their actual health, right? Their actual health, because there's development of UTIs, bladder infections, so forth and so on. So, I mean, if you could imagine just going, I don't know, 12, 13 hours or so, 8 hours, whatever it may be, without using a bathroom because of your fear of safety. So some folks may say, you know, that's like not a real debate or whatever, but yeah, that is important because it's not something we can control, first of all, right? And so if the longer we hold it'll affect us physically or health-wise. And so those things are important. And sometimes there are things we don't really think about, but you know, that's why as Shannon mentioned, doing your own research. And this is always a learning opportunity. Don't think because you did research this year, you don't need to do any educating yourself next year. You probably should do it every 6 months because the community, you know, even I have to do research. As I mentioned, we're all in a learning phase. And so it's doing that, trying to decide, trying to advocate. The more people you have that are advocating, you know, there's strength in numbers.
And realize too, if you've never used a non-gendered bathroom, and you go into a non-gendered bathroom and somebody comes in that you wouldn't normally see in a bathroom, and that might make you feel uncomfortable. I think that's how a lot of times transgender and gender non-conforming people are in a bathroom. And, you know, a lot of people say, well, we shouldn't allow transgender people to use it because then especially women won't be safe in the bathroom. But the majority of the people who are not safe in a bathroom are transgender and gender nonconforming. They are attacked in bathrooms, and they are pushed out of bathrooms and those kinds of things. So so just to put that into a little bit of perspective. So any other thoughts or questions about this case study or anything? Because this is our last case study. So either any other, or right, this is the last one, Candace, or is there one more? Oh, no, yeah. So if there are any other questions or comments or anything else that either of us can help you with, here's both of our emails and Project Peace's email. But I think we, in fact, Candace and Ashley and I were talking before this presentation that we've been really excited with how many people have come to these four meetings, and we feel that it's been a really successful way to do it. And yeah, so it's really, really good. Any other questions or anything? Oh, Ari's email is wrong on the slide. It's doorwayssva.org, and we left out the SVA on hers after doorways.
The VA, yeah.
Or doorways VA.
Doorways VA for Virginia, yeah, .org.
Yeah. Candace just put that in the chat, but for anybody who's not in the chat, just want to make sure that they know that piece. Anything else that we can help you with or stuff? I do diversity trainings too, so if there's topics that you need or things that you are interested in having someone come in and do a training for your thing, or doing it remotely, as we've been mostly doing all of our trainings since March, feel free to reach out to me. Do lots of different diversity and mental health stuff is where I also do a lot.
So can I ask a question?
Sure.
So my name is Regina, and I had a question for you, Julie. You mentioned before that you worked at a Catholic all-girls school, and I currently work at a Christian organization. And although it's mentioned that it's inclusive for LGBTQ individuals, it's very not subtle in its beliefs and just kind of the language and stuff, and it's kind of like a one person mission of mine to try to make it a little bit more inclusive and just kind of calling people out, but it's making me kind of like stand out as, oh, she's that one person. What are some other practical tools that I can use to not continue to completely ostracize myself, but also just kind of force it into the agency a little bit more, just shy of like losing my job, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
because it is working in a Christian based organization type of thing.
Right. So one thing I would suggest is say that this is part of our mission is welcoming this group of people in, but I've kind of realized that it may not be that. Can we have somebody else come in and help us do an evaluation, or can we have someone come in and do a training, just a real basic training of maybe vocabulary, and just starting with those kinds of small steps, so that it isn't just on you, that there is really somebody else who can do that, and that could be it. And you can also ask Project Peace if you're in the Arlington area. Project Peace too. We've been doing some of these trainings for different agencies in the Arlington area. I can come in and do them. So there's different groups like that. HRC, Human Resource, can also do it. So there's different groups that could come in and do trainings also for you in that way. But a lot of times that helps, and especially if you don't know anybody else in the agency that's willing to do that. And definitely, because there's definitely people that have more privilege in the agencies too. So I found out. So I was teaching at the Catholic College from 2001 to 2001 to 2007. And I came out my second or third year there. And part of it was because I was transitioning at that point from being in a relationship with a man to being in a relationship with a woman. And what I found out was the same thing was happening to also the person who was overseeing the nursery school. And because I had more privilege because I was a faculty member, my children, my wife could all come on campus. Her wife was not allowed on campus. Her kids were not allowed on campus because they're afraid that they would say something, because she was working with the young kids and I was working with faculty. And we never knew that. So also just, seeing if there might be other people that are on the outsides that believe what you do, and to also kind of find them and kind of gather them, that sometimes helps. But I think that's all I have. Do you have any other ideas, Ari?
No, I mean, there is a comment that I think, yes, it is a great reminder that it's important for allies to speak up, so that there isn't one person that's the one. I've certainly been in that position. I think in most of my employment, I mean, yes, even currently, where I am that one, but not everyone can put themselves in that position, and I completely respect that and understand that. But the way I see it personally is that someone has to do it, and that shouldn't fall back to the individual that is part of the community. It has that, again, that's what allyship is. It's so that someone is making that space comfortable for them. I think something to remember is that a lot of the times those of us that are within the community, we get tokenized, and so we've always are the one, right? And so it's kind of helpful. And then something to remember is you're not the one, because the individual that is part of the community, if there is an individual that is employed and they're part of the community, there's two of you, right? There's the individual that's part of the community, and then there's you. So it's more of like a support, more of a partnership sort of thing. And as individuals, it can get very tiring to advocate for a identity we don't hold. But it's just important to remember that that's a minor inconvenience compared to how folks of the trans community, what they do on the daily to survive.
Yeah. And the other thing, Regina, I would suggest too is if there is anybody who seems more accepting than somebody else within the administration of or the administrators of where you're working, and seeing if you could even just find one partner in there who could help you bring people in and bring in the trainings, or maybe have them suggested, and that kind of thing too. And it might be sometimes to get your foot in the door, you have to kind of go around the back door to get your foot in the door. And so finding, maybe someone who's not out, you're not seeing that's outspoken, but you're seeing that they're kind of agreeing with what you're doing, or what you're saying, then those would be the people that you would want to maybe talk to privately and say, hey, I see that you like what I'm doing, and I understand that you're not feeling comfortable saying something out. Can we work together to maybe do something, or can we write a letter together, or something like that too? I hope that helps, Regina. Does it?
Yes, it does. I'm trying to copy and paste all these suggestions so I can, figure out a game plan and see what I can keep going. It's just tough,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
completely understand even though it's me saying it, there's other people that may not be comfortable. So if I can shoulder the burden, then, I got to do what I got to do as an ally, but then also like I don't want to burn out,
Yeah. Are
and
you in Northern Virginia?
yeah, I'm in the Lorton area.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, the other group so you can reach out to us too. You can reach out to me, and I can give you more resources that are closer to you too, that could do trainings and things like that. Project Peace, we could also might be able to give you some other places within your area also, because there are some other agencies out there that can also do trainings. Yeah. And Candace has also put in the chat an evaluation form for today, and in fact, really for the whole 4th series. If you guys want to give us feedback on that, that would be great. Anybody else have questions or concerns that we can finish? We got 5 more minutes. I see Candace came on.
People are more than welcome to continue to ask questions, but I just wanted to make sure that I said thank you to Dr. Alexander and Ari for doing these presentations with Project Peace. We really appreciate it and have been so thankful to be able to offer this to our community. So thank you.
It's been fun to do.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah.
Hopefully we will, Betty, and have more in the future.
Yes, if you signed up for today or any of our sessions, we're going to make sure to send out updates about new trainings that are coming up. We will be doing some specifically around sexual and domestic violence in July and then into the fall. Looks like we've got folks slipping out. So again, thank you everybody for coming, and please join us for future opportunities.
Yes, thank you everyone.
Oh, that's a really good one. So Unity of Fairfax is hosting and streaming at Northern Virginia Interfaith Pride Service tonight at 7. Elizabeth, where would they find that if they were interested in doing that? And then Ari, the next question is definitely yours.
Yeah. Yeah. Doorways does presentations, education, and domestic violence with children. We actually have a very strong children's program, which includes children's therapists. So the children's, the director of counseling and children's services certainly does those in the community. She's done them. They're absolutely about trauma and how domestic violence affects, children's development, how the ways children will express that violence, that trauma, And it kind of goes through some myths, right? Like this idea that the young kids, young babies don't recognize that there's been violence in the home because they're so young. But that's been proven to be actually quite the opposite. So certainly those kinds of conversations and those kinds of trainings are available. Doorways does trainings about domestic and sexual violence in general. So that's my focus. If anyone does want trainings on domestic and sexual violence in the LGBTQ community, that's certainly something I can offer. But same goes to any other training. You have my email. If you're interested in having a training from Doorways, you can just shoot me an email and I'll make sure it gets to the right person.
And if you're not in the Northern Virginia area, usually there's domestic violence agencies that do education throughout the country. And if you don't know yours, 211, if you dial 211, no matter where you are in the country, they have a listing of all the domestic partners, all the domestic violence shelters and services and all of that. 211 is a great resource. If you don't know about it, I'd highly, highly recommend finding out about it. It's done by the United Way in every state and has great resources. And the Unity, so for the service, the Pride service, the Virginia Interfaith Pride service tonight at 7, if you go to the Unity of Fairfax face page to see that one, Candace put on to find your local domestic violence program at thehotline.org or centers.rainn.org. And
Sorry.
Go ahead.
So Save Them Together training, I've been through that. That's actually a pretty useful training. So it's primarily, if I remember correctly, for service for folks that work directly with children. So like teachers, pediatrics, but it's also really good to have it as a general training. I've been through it and it's pretty good. So thank you for that, Candace.
Again, I want to thank everyone. And then also, if you missed the previous sessions, the ones we got recorded, we will be sending out to everybody. So you will hopefully have those and you can watch them or share them with colleagues. Have a great afternoon, everybody.
Yep. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.